everyone, thank you for tuning in. Again, I am Kaylee Batesman, the Managing Director, Community and Partnerships at She Can Code. And today we're discussing the 11%, how we get more women in leadership tech roles. I've got the incredible Heather Dawe, who is here to discuss her journey as the Chief Data Scientist and Head of Responsible AI at UST, reflecting on over 25 years of experience shaping AI innovation in government, public sector and industry. Welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for taking time out to come and have a chat with us today.
Hi there, Kaylee. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for asking me along.
Thank you. Well, we'd love to kick off with a bit of background about you, if that's okay, a little bit to set the scene for our community.
Sure. So like you say, I'm Chief Data Scientist and Head of Responsible AI at UST, and in my role, I work with large UK and European companies, mainly global too, to help them to do the things, well, to help them to achieve the things they want to achieve with data science and AI. I've got as you kind of alluded to earlier, I've got quite a varied career, varied background in the sense of I've worked in my career so far around 25 years. Started out in industry. I've worked in government for the civil service and also for a 10-year period in the NHS, largely the central NHS. Ran my own startup for 5 years and then came to UST, where I've been, as I say, my role is to assist large companies is to benefit and gain value from AI.
Amazing. I love that you run a startup for 5 years because that's quite a very different environment. That's something we talk about a lot in our community, that people that do that, it's not for the faint-hearted.
No, it's not. And it was a great experience and something I wouldn't say no to going back to in the future. But that's helped me to do, I mean, again, sort of through my career, the ways in which you work and how you work, to have experienced quite a wide array of them is quite good because it gives you you can kind of understand where the people are coming from. If we work with startups now, and I've got a greater appreciation of their ways of working because I've run a startup, for example. But likewise with government and industry, there are huge amounts of similarities, but there's also differences, and have that appreciation. And like working with academia, which we do a reasonable, a good amount in UST, and I've done through my career, the different sectors, different sort of have different ways of working, and that familiarity is really helpful, I think.
Yes, definitely. And having that variety, we get asked a lot in our community about people worry about moving around, almost that they think it's a disadvantage from, it looks like you're hopping around, but actually so many of our members have actually said something similar to what you just said, and all the different things that you bring from different industries and all of those skills, and then running a startup, for instance, and then it's almost like the stars align and you find yourself in that role that is perfect for all of the skills that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, there's something about staying in a role for a little while to sort of show what you can do and achieve. I'm not well, yeah. I mean, there have been times in my career I've moved around a reasonable amount, and there's also been times I've stayed around in a role, and I've got friends, I've got colleagues who've been in their roles for 20 years plus, or certainly in the same company or the same organization, and I don't think there's there's merit to all of these things, I think. But like you say, I mean, I agree. The experiences I've gained through moving across different, across government, like let's talk about the NHS, and then into through a startup into industry has been really helpful. I think, the ways in which today my teams, we use learning that methodologies that I've done in health, for example, in the financial services. You can bring different methods to different places, and they prove very effective. And that's just an example. I've done that a lot through my career.
Yeah. And as you said, you've had quite an impressive 25-year career shaping innovation in AI and data. What drew you first to the field, though? What's kept you inspired along the way, and what drew you to the field in the first place?
It's a good question. I mean, I did a maths degree. I mean, I was always, I did a maths degree at university, and I've always been fascinated by maths and the ways in which you can, and certainly probability theory, statistics, the ways in which you can use mathematical theory to predict what's going to happen next. And really, that's the basis for all AI, pretty much. So when I left university, I actually started off as a software. I mean, data science didn't exist back then. I'm quite an old data scientist, and so I started off as a software developer, and that was working in telecoms, working in retail, with large data coding and innovating with apps and services in different ways in those sectors. And at the time I realized that if I could apply machine learning, statistical modeling to data at scale, you could do some really cool things. And this was more than 20 years ago. um, and what and through my career I've been driven to do that more. I mean, I do very whilst academia has had its attractions to me through my career, and obviously academia, universities work with business a lot. We work with business a lot. It's the real world problems that applying these methodologies in the real world it has its challenges, because the real world in a good way is messy. It's not, it doesn't necessarily conform perfectly to a logical flow of things, and that has its own challenges. But at the same time, the thing is, you can achieve when you can apply these methodologies in like I say, real world system, in the NHS, for example, in big business, can have a big impact. And I suppose I've been driven to do that through. It's a fascinating area, and it's not lost any of its fascination for me through my career.
It's interesting because you obviously were interested in STEM when you were younger. Did you make that connection though with the real world problems, that you can actually go in and make such an impact as you do? Or what did you think of that at school? You just, well, I love maths, I'll just follow maths.
Well, I don't think I really thought about it at school, but it was when I really started working. You start to look, I mean, I recognise now I pretty much have always been an innovator. I didn't really recognise that myself when I was younger. I just thought, well, everyone thinks in these ways to sort of build, sort of design and build solutions and stuff. And I wasn't even thinking about solutions. It was more like, actually, I could see how you could use analytics or machine learning, or if I could predict what's going to happen next, I could do something with that useful, and that's what's been my drive. So it wasn't really a sort of active observation. Yeah, this is STEM. This is. It was more like, well, I mean, I do very much enjoy maths. I mean, I'm also quite an artistic thinker, so I'm, yeah, but maths as a subject is fascinating, and using, like I say, using probability theory to help improve things has been my driver, really. And on a scale which generally means building out information systems to support that.
I love the fact that you said artistic thinker, because I've heard that before from data scientists, and people don't quite realise that as well, that you put data and being creative together, and then it's almost like data scientists are like, more people should know that.
No, I'd agree. I mean, data science is actually a very creative subject, sort of profession, if you like it, to solve. There's often lots of different, well, you have a problem, you have a business problem, you have a challenge, in whatever capacity, you need to understand it and explore it, and then you do need to use, I mean, you need to have understanding of the theory, well, an appreciation of how you can apply machine learning, probability theory, and sort of to actually solve the problem. But at the same time, it takes a level of creativity to do so. And I mean, I do think the creative part is what a data scientist can really bring to a problem, and really come up with some really good solutions. So yeah, creativity is an important part of my role, my job.
And I wanted to pick your brains a little bit about tech leadership today, because it's something that a lot of companies struggle with, about, not just ladies coming into tech, but how to retain them as well, move them through to leadership roles, because only 11% of executive tech roles are held by women. So from your experience, what are the biggest barriers that women face in reaching leadership positions in AI and also technology as a whole?
I mean, I think I get asked this question a lot, and I think there's a number of different things that contribute to it. Um, and it does begin at school, and the way in which maths and STEM subjects are still very much seen, for the wrong reasons. I think you won't be surprised me saying that. I think, it is a boys' subject in school, and so it kind of starts there, and it goes through the education system, and obviously, and obviously huge, lots of efforts being made to change that, and we need to continue to do so. The role of role models is really important, and I've realised that more. Is that I've got two daughters, and I think I realize that probably more when I look to the world through, or try and look through the world through their eyes than my own at times. So role models are important, but and when we get into the workplace, there's a whole number of facets here. I mean, I work for UST, an employer that push forward, women in their roles, and I think actually most employers do, or at least that's what they endeavor to do. But obviously that's not permeating through to, as you say, leadership roles in technology. I mean, part of that is because only 25% of, or roughly 25% of the tech workforce are women, but 25% is still actually a lot more than 11%. So you know if that's, we should be at least at 25% if we're going to reflect the general, but that in itself, it's still women are still in a minority in the workplace. But I think it's also important to recognize that it's like things like imposter syndrome. Women are much more likely to experience imposter syndrome than men, and what can we do to combat things like that? Because that's I mean, I've experienced imposter syndrome for a long time through my career. So personally, it's affected me. It's things like imposter syndrome that we can look to help people. It's not only women who but the majority to overcome, and things like, I mean, making it as straightforward for people. And it's not only women who take career breaks when they either have children or have other caring responsibilities, but making it as easy as possible for people to come back into their career and then develop further in their managerial and leadership careers are important. And steps are being taken, but that's it's certainly some of the things that slow down the change that we're talking about.
Yes, definitely. You're right. It is something that we get asked a lot from companies about. For some reason, ladies get to sort of mid-career and then they drop out for lots of different reasons. Family, for instance, was one that you mentioned, but how to make sure that they come back or have that role model there to inspire them to come back. It's interesting you said you have daughters, because they're going to have that role model from home. They're going to have that influence from home. Did you have that, or did you just think, I enjoy maths, or was it a teacher or somebody that kind of pushed you in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always enjoyed maths. I mean, my my dad was an engineer, my mum's a teacher, so I had parent both, they both had careers. But I don't necessarily, I think I just really, I mean, I enjoyed a lot of subjects, and I suppose I had to make a decision, and I chose maths, and but then so I don't, I don't know, I suppose I just followed my nose and decided I wanted to pursue that.
Yeah, and then that's the thing though, even if ladies are they follow that and then they go into the world of tech, somewhere along the line they also decide perhaps this isn't for me. So like you said, that imposter syndrome can kick in, and maybe their work environment.
Well, with my first job, I was a software developer. So I live in Yorkshire. It was in Yorkshire, and I was pretty much in a close to whole male environment. And whilst I wasn't made to feel unwelcome in any stretch of the imagination, people were very friendly. It's still very. I mean, I think I just I'm my sort of, I then really I just saw it as, this is the thing this is how it is, and I didn't really think about it that much. It was just, I just carried on, but in that, when I look back now, it's like, oh, that would, because I'd be in an office of, I'd be the one woman in an office of 15 odd men, and now that's like, but at the same time, I just got on with it, and I don't really, I didn't really feel it made a difference until really I had children, and then you start to notice different things. Things change a bit when I had kids, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. There are different things along your career that happen as well. And then people sort of think, oh, maybe this isn't the company for me, or perhaps I need to move to a different environment. Or you're right, sometimes that just happens as your career happens, and then you want to move around to different companies that might have more sort of support networks,
Yeah.
depending on what
No,
you
no, completely. I mean, support networks within your employers are really important, I think, and it's and and that and the culture and the working environment. I've probably moved twice because of those things. Most of the time, I've moved because I've wanted to explore something new or do something different.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and so you've worked across government, public sector, and industry, and you have a varied career, as we touched upon. How do these sectors differ in their approach to AI innovation, and what lessons can they learn from each other?
that's a good question, and because I think. I mean, it was an interesting one. I spent, like I said, I spent a long time working in the NHS, and I was building data science teams, and we were building some really novel systems and ways of working with data, sort of 12, 15 years ago. That actually I didn't realise at the time that NHS data, certainly in the central NHS, was actually very mature, and the things you could do with that data, in a secure, safe environment, to be clear, but the things you could do with that data. Um, I went out to industry imagining it would be similar, but actually the relative maturity of industry at the time was was actually behind the NHS. So there are things you may, and so my assumption that industry would be miles ahead of the NHS, and that wasn't actually the case. So sometimes you make these, but I mean, the NHS over the past decade or so has probably suffered somewhat through, the levels of investment that have gone into back office systems. So that may well have changed. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is there's always an assumption that industry will be ahead, and it isn't actually necessarily the case. So that's one observation. In terms of the ways in which AI gets developed, I mean, in the public, this is very generalized, but in the public sector, you're seeking to do something to make something more cost effective. Well, no, you're seeking to in industry, you're typically seeking to make something more efficient or whatever. You're looking to get the edge so you can make money. In the public sector, you're actually typically looking to either save money or improve the quality of care or the quality of education or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know how much. I don't think that actually has an impact on the way you develop AI. Um, and so, as such, I don't necessarily think there's a distinction between public and private sector. I think there's pockets of ways of working within both the public and commercial industry that it would be very useful for both to learn from. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, you get innovation at a real fast pace in private industry. You get that in the NHS and other places too, in pockets. And actually, the learning, the sort of cross fertilization of knowledge can be beneficial both ways.
Yeah, I think almost a shared theme across all industries at the moment, and sectors is the worry of AI, and that fear of how people are using it, the data that is included in it, and I think that's getting better where now people kind of understand a little bit more about how it should be used, uh, and who's using it and why. But I think definitely at first that conversation was more around nerves, and the headlines were quite, kind of, it's going to take over our jobs, and so that's kind of an overarching
Yeah.
theme of
No,
most.
I think that those nerves are true across sector.
Mm.
So the sort of yeah, and I mean AI is changing our industries, and will continue to do so for a while yet, I think. Um, and yeah, completely understand the nervousness.
Yeah. Yeah, and the different sectors and industries can definitely learn from each other in that way, in that sense. Um, the UK government, their recent engagement with companies like Anthropic suggests a growing focus on AI in public services. How do you see AI reshaping the public sector in the next few years?
I think, I mean, I think in much in the same way that at the moment, um, I think it's across the piece that businesses, organisations are seeking to understand how they can use AI in positive ways to bring improvements to their business, or the whatever the aims of the organisation are. Um, in an area like the public sector, because I mean, we all want better public services, but we don't want to pay more taxes to pay for them. And the point I'm saying, that that's a glib statement, but I'm not saying that's wholly true. But the point, it's to we're not, the public sector has the opportunity to save money using AI that it can then push into either frontline care, frontline education, better council services, etc., etc. So I think that's probably the first area of focus for the government to seek to get more out of the taxes we pay for frontline services, whatever they are, by using AI to bring efficiencies. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. I mean,
Yes.
of course, things using AI to improve the quality of care, the quality of education, and in that, I mean, I was talking recently with a clinician who's working to use AI more in his pathology work. It's things like that, and that requires a lot of clinical knowledge and awareness and testing and exploration, and importantly, scientific research that shows that using AI in the ways that they're approaching it is better than current clinical care or the clinical process. That is really important work, and it's going to take quite a while, and it will come to fruition in time. The opportunities to get efficiencies in the public sector are right there, and I think the government are quite aware of that.
Yes, definitely. I think those fears at first were kind of, how is it going to be used? And like you said, it's also building up that evidence that it is making things more efficient. And over time, that will show that more people will have faith in how it's used and why it's used. Whereas those concerns at the moment are still around, you still need human intervention to
Oh,
check
very much.
everything
Yeah,
over.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, I use AI on a day-to-day basis as part of my job. To I use it to code and explore stuff, and myself, I think, my goodness, it's going to put me out of a job as a data scientist, and I don't think it is. I think it's going to change my job, or change the way I do things at least, and actually will speed up some of the things I do, and enable me to use. So I'm speaking for myself as a data scientist, not just for me, if you see what I mean, but it will enable data scientists to use their creativity, as we were talking about earlier, to do some really progressive, well, different progressive new stuff, and relevant stuff for whoever they're doing the work for. And yeah, and I think that will enable me and my colleagues to do more. So
Yeah.
I think it's very much, the thing is, it is going to change how it's in the process of changing how we work, and that's as much an opportunity as it is a threat. In fact, it's probably more of an opportunity than a threat. And so I'm not saying just blindly go and, crack on and use AI to your heart's content, as you've alluded to earlier, that, there's security things, are ethical, etc., issues that you need to think about when you do it. But to explore it and use it, I think, is an important part of most of our jobs now.
Yes, yeah, and freeing up that time to do other things and to be more efficient. That list as well that you want to get to, that you can never quite get to because you have too much else to do. And sometimes there's always going to be those people that don't react very well to change. I remember years ago I used to cover data centers, and I remember when that started to become virtual, a lot of CIOs and CTOs were like, I need to look after physical servers. This is my job. This is what I want to do. And there was this sort of pushback against, but if I don't look after physical servers all day, what do I do? And actually, it just frees up your time to do other things. But there's always going to be that pushback of people thinking, I don't like change. I don't want time to do other things.
Yeah.
But
That's a
more
natural
efficient.
thing. And it's also important for us to, for industry and employers to recognise the the skills, the very human skills that we bring to our roles, and the relevance of that. I mean, I think that will come out more in time. So, the importance of those, and because a lot of the time, I think, it's going to be how we work with AI, not how AI does our job for us. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. You're a vocal advocate for ethical AI. In your view, what are the most critical ethical challenges we must address as AI becomes more embedded in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot I could say here. So, what's the most important thing? I suppose I'd say, why are we having this conversation in the first place? We're here talking about how we can, the 11%. But if we look to AI and recognise it, AI is trained on data, and data carries a lot of bias, and actually. So AI is not, AI inherently reflects the data and the culture it's trained on. So if we train it on Western data that's dominated by particular points of view, that's what we're going to get and what we're going to see in the AI. And what's the dominant sort of force in Western society today? Recognizing that and seeing that actually the importance of diverse data, diverse points of view, in both the people and the data, that's the people that build the AI and the data it gets trained on, um, will ensure that we have more culturally rich and diverse AI in the future. And we're having this conversation today because of the dominance the 11% question that's happening in AI today. So I think that is actually one of my biggest concerns.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The data that it is trained on is a concern. That where we're at currently, to think that AI is being trained on the data that we have currently, which some companies have been working so hard on to change. It can be concerning as to how we will move forward with ethical AI.
And like I say, also have ensuring diversity in the people who develop it, because as much as you get data bias in the machine learning models that drive AI, you also get developer bias. So it's those kind of things. I mean, yeah, the importance of it. It's the right thing to do to achieve diversity in the technology workforce, and it's also required to ensure AI is diverse.
Yes, yes, developer bias. I haven't heard that one before. I wanted to ask you quick about young women coming through the ranks. So for young women and also underrepresented groups looking to build a leadership career in tech, what advice would you give them, and what changes would you like to see from companies to support them better? Is there anything you wish someone had told you now, looking back?
I personally, it would have. The thing is, it role models are important. Like I say, I mean, they're not the only. I mean, I'm a role model whether I like it or not, but that's not the only. It's not the only. The thing is, I actually see it as a responsibility to stand up and talk about these things, because I know that visibility is really important, and that's one of the things it would have been helpful for me. And at the same time, I suppose it would have been it's taken me some time to build up the confidence. The thing is, I've thought, I'm an innovator, so I've thought differently about things through my career, and now I see that as a strength.
Mm.
I didn't all because and it wasn't always encouraged or facilitated in me. And the thing is, for women coming through, until we get equality in the technology workforce, you're actually, there's going to be different points of view that you have that might not necessarily be the general view. And that's not just a woman thing, that's probably a diverse, diversity as well. So what am I saying there? I suppose I'm saying it's important for companies to just champion, recognize that the differences people have, and actually the strengths that you get from a diverse workforce, and to encourage and facilitate it. And that leadership role as well, the leadership roles, I think, it's a leader needs to be able to empathize with the people working with them, and to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and how they can help them to develop themselves in the ways they want to. And fundamentally, we're there to lead, to make sure we get work delivered. But the ways you can do that by helping the people working with you to grow in the ways they want to, in ways that meet what you need to deliver. But at the same time, the trick to pull is it's recognizing that more and helping people to develop in the ways they want to, like I say, holistically recognizing that a diverse workforce brings better outcomes, and that's been measured. I haven't got the statistics on the sort of tip of my tongue, but it's been proven that, you know, a greater diversity in the workforce leads to better business outcomes. So, you know, recognizing that and seeking to grow on that.
Yes, yeah, I love everything you just said, especially with being an innovator and wanting to try new things. Sometimes when you land in a company where you're allowed to be like that, it's almost a culture of, I worked in an American company that was very sort of, Kaylee, if you're having an idea, test it and prove that it works. Don't cost us any money, but test it and see what happens. Whereas some companies, you're not allowed to do that, and you do find yourself thinking, well, even if I come up with something different, I'm only going to get shot down. And you actually go into yourself and you stop coming up with things.
And I think that, Kaylee, I think you just hit it on the nail on the head with me. That's what I've done through my career. And
you just think, where am I going next?
And sometimes I've been shot down, and sometimes I've been championed. You know, UST is a company that champions innovations. I'm grateful for that. And it's the other organisations I've worked through my career. I mean, I could take, you know, there've been moments in my career where an individual's made a huge difference and said, yeah, Heather knows what she's doing, you know, let her crack on and grow and you know, and I've delivered and really shown the promise of things. I suppose it's, as you said, you know, it's, you have organisations who champion that, you have ones that don't, that sort, and it's, yeah, that's not the only aspect of, you know, we're talking about innovation here, but you know, rather than necessarily than diversity, although it's that recognition of different people's skills and the ways of thinking, you know, and that's what I mean about empathy, to sort of to understand that people may have different ideas to you or think a bit differently, and actually that's a strength, you know, and let's use that and do some really cool things together. So
especially if something hasn't been working as well, and somebody comes up and says, you know what, why don't we think about this differently and try something? If you're shut down at that point and you can see that perhaps change is needed, or they need to at least embrace a slightly different way of thinking, and you're still shut down, then you kind of realize, actually, that's not for me, and I need to find a different environment there. I love what you said about role models as well. I completely agree with that, because I think as well, role models at different stages throughout people's careers are also important, not just the ones at the top, because I've sat at events before and you hear some inspiring talks from like a big executive, and you're looking at her and you're thinking, she looks fantastic, she's got a fantastic job, I can't relate. And
how do I get there? How do I get where I am now? So that, as you're saying, the sort of pathway, people through along that pathway is really important. I completely agree with that. So yeah.
Yeah, there's someone just a couple of steps ahead of you, and they might even not even realize that they're being a role model, but if they're just visible, that helps, because then it's like it helps you with, well, how am I going to get to that, where I'm speaking at an event and I'm an executive and I travel the world? And also, that's not something that everybody wants to do as well. I find those people are put up there as role models, but actually some people just think, that sounds like hell to me, I don't want to be that person. I would, you know, I'm looking at somebody else and they don't realize that I'm looking to them as a role model, and the expertise that they have in their field, and they might not necessarily be somebody that's very out there, and you know, out there giving public speaking and all of that. You know, people might be thinking, that is not for me.
No, completely. And that's just it, isn't it? It's that recognition of the sort of the richness of the career paths we can have, and you know, the differences in those, and the visibility of different people, you know, and if we're talking about increasing women in the workforce and different women in those different places, to show people younger in their career of the places they can get to. I mean, yeah, role models are a part of it for sure. So.
Definitely. Heather, we're already out of time. I could keep picking your brains on this for a lot longer, but we are already out of time. I'm afraid it has flown by. So thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with us on Spilling the Tea today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.